Hey everyone, this is Pete. Welcome back to Atari A to Z, a series of short playthroughs of Atari 8-bit games, some of which I grew up with and some of which are new to me. Today is one of the former. This is Capture the Flag by Paul Edelstein, published by Sirius Software in 1983. It is the follow-up to Way Out, which you may recall we covered a few weeks back, and in fact I mentioned Capture the Flag during that video as well. The main difference between this and Way Out is that this is a two-player competitive game that uses a split-screen incarnation of the 3D engine that Edelstein developed for Way Out. There's a few interesting things about this game. One of the things that caught my attention most of all is the fact that this is one of the earliest ever games in which the music was done by a guy called George Sanger, who a lot of people will probably know a bit better as the Fat Man. This is a guy who's doing a lot of music and sound design and production contracting today. But in sort of the late 90s or so, early 2000s maybe, the early days of the CD-ROM era anyway, he was a big deal in game music. So he composed soundtracks for things like The Seventh Guest, Wing Commander, a lot of these early sort of cinematic games on PC that started to place a lot more of an emphasis on soundtrack than previous titles had. And Capture the Flag was a very early example of his work. And it's got some interesting ideas in the soundtrack as well. It's got a dynamic soundtrack that adjusts itself according to how close the two players are in the maze. There's a few other interesting ideas in this game as well that again kind of build on what Way Out does. So we've got an auto map again, which can't get stolen from you this time, which is nice. And there's a really interesting movement system that I'll demonstrate when we come to the gameplay. There's a compass movement system in which you can move basically by looking at the 2D map and pushing in directions, or you can use walking movement, which is your sort of rotate and walk forwards movement. And the combination of those two movement styles in the game and the fact you can switch between them just by holding down the fire button on your joystick gives us an early example of a game that is actually incorporating some sort of strafing or sidestepping system, which is very unusual to see at the time. We didn't really see a coherent method of implementing that kind of movement in games until much later, until games like Wolfenstein 3D. And so to see it in such an early 3D game, yeah, it's pretty remarkable. In fact, the whole game is pretty remarkable as well, as we'll see. So, enough talk, let's go and have a look. Alright, here we are with Capture the Flag by Paul Edelstein, published by Sirius Software. So, several ways to play this game. One player is the invader, and the other player is the defender. And what you have to do is the invader has to get to one of the blue gates over on the right hand side of the map down at the bottom, and the defender has to stop them just by running into them. Simple enough, right? When you play in single player, you can choose to be either the invader or the defender. When you play in two-player modes, then one person takes each role. So, we'll be the invader for now. That means we're on the left. And so, we are off on our journey to try and get one of those gates. And the delicious flag bounty that lies within. So, you probably immediately see the similarities to Way Out in this game. So we've got the first person perspective, smooth scrolling 3D world. We've got the auto map. Oh no, we're going to get caught. We are very much going to get caught. Whew, got away from that. Got away with that. Yeah, so we got the smooth scrolling 3D game world. We've got the auto map that is based on your vision rather than bumping into walls. So if you can see it in the 3D world, it will get added to the map, which is really cool. And yeah. So I mentioned in the introduction that we've got this unusual control scheme in this. So we have... Oh, I think it's all over. There we go. It is all over. Yeah, so there's an unusual control scheme in this. So you can move in walking mode, which means that you're supposed to be looking at the 3D view, and you turn and you push forward to go forward, and everything is happy. Now, you can also hold down the fire button to go into compass mode. In compass mode, what you do is you basically ignore the 3D view and you push in the direction on the map you would like to go. So if you want to go north, you hold down the fire button, you push up. If you want to go west, you hold down the fire button and push left. And both of these are useful in different circumstances. So walking mode is very useful for mapping out the maze, because it means you can turn round and you can see where the walls are, and you can get a much better view of all the corridors and stuff. But compass mode allows you to get around much more quickly without having to worry about turning, because turning can take up a lot of time. But in situations like this, where you're getting pretty close to the defender, you'll want to try and escape as quickly as you possibly can. And for that... Oh, too late. I was going to say, for that, compass mode is ideal. But it was not ideal enough in that scenario. So like I said in the introduction, I think one of the most interesting things about this game is the fact that the music was composed by George Sanger, the Fat Man. One of his earliest games. I don't think it was his very first game or anything, but it was certainly an early example of his work. And the things I find quite interesting about it are that it's... Oh, we're in the dead end again. We're going to die. Yeah, despite being an early work and obviously running on much more limited hardware than that which played host to some of his more well-known works like Wing Commander and The Seventh Guest, you can still recognise it as his music. It's great. So just some of those little jazzy phrases that he uses in there, they're very, very characteristic of his other work. If you listen to things like The Seventh Guest soundtrack, less so Wing Commander, which was more sort of military in style, and I think maybe several people collaborated on that music as well, I want to say. I could be wrong on that, I haven't looked into it. Certainly though, The Seventh Guest, the soundtrack to that game, has a lot in common with the soundtrack to this one. We've won! And just the sort of jazzy phrases, the blues notes, the syncopated rhythms. Yeah, it's all clearly recognisable as his style, despite being probably a decade before some of his more well-known work. As I say, I had no idea that he was working this early in video games, because I've always associated him very much with the CD-ROM era in particular, maybe slightly before that, but sort of when PC games really started making an effort with presentation, when we started getting a lot more in the way of MIDI music, sampled sound, 256 colour graphics, that sort of thing. That's the era of gaming that I associate him with. Excuse me. And so it's really cool to see what he was getting up to before that was a thing. And it's also quite interesting that I associate him with the CD-ROM era. That was sort of a big technological innovation at the time. Games like The Seventh Guest and so on, although in some respects they got panned for not being perhaps as good as they could be in some regards, in other areas they were very much respected as being innovative, technologically impressive, real showcase titles for the new technology. I just find it quite interesting that even in this early game, this 1983 game for Atari 8-bit computers, it's still an incredibly technologically advanced game for the time period that our friend the Fat Man chose to associate himself with. Right, our defender friend is around the bottom, so hopefully we can sneak up here now. Let's turn that way so we can get a better view of the map. Yeah, dead end. Now, one thing you might notice about the music in this is that it kind of changes as the game progresses. It's actually a dynamic soundtrack. That was one of the big innovative things about it. It's based on... I think it's based primarily on the proximity between the two players. So the closer you are to each other, the more intense the music gets, the faster the tempo is, the more complex the rhythms get. Oh dear, I think I'm in trouble. Yeah, I'm definitely in trouble. Come on, just kill me. And so you hear every playthrough starts with this simple single voice track. And as the game progresses, as you get closer to each other at very specific points in the music, it will start introducing additional musical phrases according to how the game is unfolding. So there, we're pretty close to each other, so we're getting this very high complexity kind of jazzy patterns going on. Run away! Run away, run away, run away. Oh, hello. Well, that was a nice easy route to the finish. There we go. Alright, let's have one more go. Let's see if we can even the score, at least. So there's no end to this game. It just keeps going until you've had enough of it. And you'll notice that rather optimistically the scores go up to 9999. So if you really want to play this all day and see who can be the first to 10,000 points, then be my guest. But yeah, in some ways that's quite a sensible way to handle a competitive two-player game like this, because it allows you to set your own rules. And then between you can come up with what the conditions for ultimate victory are. Oh, dead end. This maze is surprisingly complex. Yeah, the mazes are generated randomly each time as well, so there's no two games are going to be quite the same. So unlike Way Out, which had predefined mazes that were saved on the disc, this one, it generates something brand new for you every time. Which is cool, keeps the game fresh, potentially infinitely replayable. I mean, okay, the concept isn't going to last you forever. You're not going to want to play this forever, maybe, but it's a good competitive game, and the concept is simple enough that it's aged really nicely. So it's not one of those games that doesn't really hold up today. In fact, this holds up really well today, because it performs well, especially considering the host platform, and we've equalised. And it's just a really solid concept for a game, really. It's I haven't really come to appreciate until recently. I kind of recognised the impressive graphics of this when I was a kid, but I didn't really get into playing the game itself. I didn't really understand the concept fully, and I didn't really have anyone to play with either. And so, not really understanding the concept, the computer would beat me pretty easily. And so, yeah, ultimately I didn't play it that much. But returning to it now, yeah, it's really cool. Very, very impressed with this. Much as I was very impressed with Way Out as well. So, yeah, good job, Paul Edelstein. Right, let's leave that there for now. As always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again next time. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please help out the channel by leaving a like or a comment and subscribing. New episodes of Atari A to Z are on Tuesdays and Atari ST A to Z on Thursdays. Check out atariatoz.wordpress.com for a full archive. Do please also check out my other projects moegamer.net, where I explore Japanese and Japanese-inspired games from yesterday and today, and videopackgames.wordpress.com, which aims to catalogue the small but well-formed library of the Philips G7000 Videopack computer, also known as the Magnavox Odyssey 2. You can also support my work on Patreon or buy me a coffee. You can find links to do both down in the video description. Thanks again, and I'll see you next time.